The resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the crisis of Iraq will do much to help the rift between the West and the Muslims. Scrupulous observance of international law will help stabilize the area and indeed other parts of the global neighborhood as well. However, even the settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and a return to normalcy in Iraq will not guarantee global peace and justice. Certain other fundamental disparities must also be removed. The international community needs to do more, much more, to reduce the huge disparities in wealth, power and knowledge among the peoples of the world. Money spent on arms, for instance, should be channeled into activities that benefit the half of humanity which lives on less than $2 a day US. Of course, we must not forget Afghanistan and Lebanon. There will be no real peace in the Islamic world unless they include enduring solutions for the situation in Afghanistan and Lebanon. Above all, we need to focus upon developing understanding and empathy within the multicultural neighborhood. All our religions and cultures enjoin us to reach out to the other, to share their joy as well as their pain. Our philosophical traditions are profoundly aware of a common humanity. It is this dimension of religion that we should emphasize in our globalized, increasingly globalized neighborhood. For Muslims, to know the other is almost a religious injunction.
The two great hungers in our world today, if you look around, are the hunger for spirituality and the hunger for social justice at the same time. And the connection between the two is the one the world is waiting for. So I see new movements now because politics is failing on all the big issues. Global warming, global poverty, HIV/AIDS, all the pandemics, Darfur. Politics is failing. So when that happens, often social movements rise up to change politics. And the best social movements have spiritual foundations. So it may be that dialogue like this is important. More important might be if the faith community begins to become actors in the world on the big issues of our time, changing politics and making that connection between spirituality and social justice.
Each one of us make our own sense of identity, our sense of meaning, against the background of some practices, beliefs, values, experiences, history, and language. What we need to be able to do is understand what we bring and what characterizes the background that the other brings. And our ability in dialogue to understand each other and each other's backgrounds is the crucial piece that is demanded at this moment as a result of globalization.
Unfortunately, the loud voice of extremism do not let us listen to the voice of wisdom and understanding. All around the world, we have a lot of people that they believe that we have a common destiny all around the world, and finding a solution for the humankind should be based on this common ground. And in Islamic world, we have many scholars believing in the fact that without democracy in our world, without development, without taking advantage of the Western achievements, we cannot continue living. But these two extreme poles, extreme sides, as of 200-300 years ago, they started their existence in the form of colonialism, and recently in the form of unilateralism and preemptive wars and terrorism, violent terrorism. We can see that in both extremes, and now the international arena is very dark.
The idea that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, if you were to eliminate it, would solve all the world's problems is one of the most ridiculous canards that abounds amongst people, and it's trotted out almost as if it's gospel, if you'll excuse my mixing my interreligious metaphors there. And, for example, if Israel disappeared, then there'd be no problem in Iraq. There would be no Iran-Iraq war. There would be no Algeria with thousands being murdered. There would be no butchering in Hama in Syria. There wouldn't have been problems in Somalia, Darfur, and Prime Minister Badawi gave Lebanon and Iraq a little mention at the end. But it all focuses upon this. Now, this is not because the Israeli-Palestinian is not important. Of course it's important. But it is being used and abused as a scapegoat simply for people to fail to look themselves in the mirror and direct honestly what the questions are, and to find a way of diverting attention from their own particular focus. Now, that's not going to help Palestinians or Israelis. That's simply going to compound the problem. Now, this conflict is a real conflict. It's a lightning rod for all kinds of complexes. Yes, it does need to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed in a very honest manner, and in a manner in which we seek to understand one another and not simply to point the finger at one another. And that, I think, is a really crucial factor in terms of all our relationships. There is a need for honesty. Honesty is not coming, and I say this as a rabbi and as one who presumes to use the term religious leader. Religious leaders, like political leaders, are not honest. They are not facing themselves with integrity and with autocritique, self-criticism. Self-criticism is the most important component to facilitate authentic dialogue. Until we recognize what's wrong within our own community as well as praising it up to the heavens, we are not going to be able to proceed any further. So there is wonderful communication. There's more communication than ever before. But if we want it to go deeper and affect the points that you are talking about, we have to have the courage and the integrity to look ourselves in the mirror and say not what's wrong with him, but what's wrong with me and what can I do about it.
God created us different. We are meant to be different. We should celebrate this difference between us. And through education, I think, and through the goodwill of many people sitting here, we can manage to get to the state of making these differences matter and teaching it to the future generation, because what we're talking about here is our future. It's not what we are living now. We need to think of the young people, our children, and what they are going to face in the future. What we are facing now is too much death, too much blood everywhere. And our children are growing up with views and pictures, news from every corner of the earth about violence.
Usually some people talk about the clash of civilizations, you know, and I don't agree with this word of clash of civilization. I think the situation is much more complex. Actually, I think the good expression is to talk about the clash of ignorance. And what is interesting with the situation of Europe is that it's a very specific theater of observation. You see, when you look what's going on in Europe, you have two kinds of model of integration. And that's why in my country, in France, but also everywhere in Europe, we are very much involved with this question of identity. What are we? What it means to be French, to be European, to be Egyptian, to be American, for now and for the future, for instance. And by talking with that, we have two kinds of models. We have the multicultural model and what we call the Republican model. The multicultural, which is the model of the northern of Europe, Great Britain, Belgium, and so on. In these countries, they do recognize the ethnic or religious differences, and they address it. You see, there are specific measures for that. In southern of Europe, we have the Republican model, what we call aggressive assimilation, even if I don't like the word aggressive, but you see what this means? It means that we don't recognize any differences between the religion or the ethnic origin. Everybody is French or Spanish or Italian. You belong to your religious community. You are, of course, completely free to practice your worship, but there is no difference between a citizen and another one. And we know that these two types of models have shown their own limits.
Dialogue is happening, interfaith dialogue all over the world. All the moderates are talking, while the actors on religion are often doing very divisive things. If religion is a wedge to divide us, we'll continue on this path. If it becomes a bridge to bring us together on the really big issues, we move from dialogue to a new kind of religious action in the world. And then the world perceives the faith community is leading on the big social reform issues and holding politics accountable and not being used by politics. If that were to happen, this would be at the forum in a year or two or three a very different kind of conversation.